They said it was a mass suicide, 900 people who blindly followed a madman into the jungle and drank poison. But what if that's not what happened at all?
It's the most beautiful place I've ever been in all my life.
I really appreciate being here, being able to work under Father's direction.
What if Jonestown wasn't a cult tragedy, but a cover-up, one that hid something far more organized, far more terrifying, and far less accidental? In 1978, the world watched in horror as photos of bodies sprawled across the Guyanese jungle flooded television screens. But the story they were told, of blind devotion and madness, barely scratched the surface. Behind the Kool-Aid and chaos may have been a carefully constructed operation, and Jim Jones might not have been the one pulling the strings. They say over 900 people died by suicide in the jungle, that they drank poison willingly, that they followed a madman to their end. That's the story we were told. But what if that's not what really happened? What if Jonestown wasn't just a cult disaster, but something much darker and much more controlled? In November 1978, the world was shocked by images of bodies piled in rows at a place called Jonestown in Guyana. Most of them were women and children. They said it was mass suicide ordered by Jim Jones, the leader of the People's Temple. He had moved his followers from California to South America, promising peace, safety, and a better life.
But we have no place to go now. It's either go to someplace like Cuba, our promised land, which we are wanting to get out of the conflict between the capitalist and the socialist world, into a free socialist territory in the third world.
But instead they found barbed wire, armed guards, and a nightmare they couldn't escape. News reporters and government officials painted Jones as a dangerous lunatic. But parts of the story didn't add up. Not all the victims died from poison. Some were shot. Others were injected with cyanide. The scene looked less like suicide and more like a cleanup. And then there's the question no one ever truly answered. How did Jones pull all of this off without help? He wasn't just a preacher. Jones had political connections, secret meetings, and a long trail of donations that led to powerful people. He had ties to lawyers, mayors, and even contacts rumored to be in U.S. intelligence. He somehow convinced the government of Guyana to let hundreds of Americans build a town in the middle of the jungle. That's not easy. And the fact that no one really stopped him is even harder to explain. It's incredibly weird. Some believe Jonestown wasn't just a cult. It was a test control experiment, a secret program disguised as a religious movement. The idea sounds wild, until you realize the US government had already done things like this before. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA ran MK Ultra.
Kool-Aid was spiked with LSD. It was horrible.
A real project that used drugs and psychological torture to try and control people's minds. What if Jonestown was part of that same kind of plan? The official story ended in a jungle clearing, but maybe that was just the beginning. Maybe Jonestown was never supposed to be understood. Maybe it was meant to vanish, along with the truth. When the People's Temple moved to Guyana, Jim Jones told his followers they were building a paradise.
An evangelical preacher led nearly 1,000 followers from the United States deep into the jungles of South America.
A new world. A safe place free from racism, poverty, and government control. But the dream quickly turned into a nightmare. Once inside Jonestown, no one could leave. Armed guards watched the gates. Families were separated. People were punished for speaking out. And every night, Jones's voice echoed through the loudspeakers.
Memorial. No man takes my life from me. I lay my life down.
Warning of spies and enemies waiting outside the jungle. Some followers still believed in him. Others were too scared to fight back. But something else was going on, something even stranger. Former members said Jones gave people drugs every day. Tranquilizers, sleeping pills, strange medications. Survivors later said they often felt foggy, confused, and disconnected, like their minds weren't their own. Some believe this wasn't about keeping people calm. It was about control. The drills made it worse. Jones called them white nights. In the middle of the night, he'd wake the whole camp and tell them it was time to die. Sometimes they were told to drink poison, only to find out it was a test. Other times they were told the government was coming to kill them, over and over again. The same terror, the same fear, until no one questioned it anymore. That's what makes people wonder. Was this more than a cult? Was it a real-life experiment in mind control? It's not just a theory. In the 1950s, the CIA ran MKULTRA, a secret program that used drugs and fear to test how far people could be pushed. The government admitted it years later, after most of the files were destroyed. Could Jonestown have been another phase of that project? The deeper you dig, the less Jonestown looks like a religious tragedy, and the more it feels like a controlled collapse. A place built to test the limits of fear, obedience, and silence. And once the cracks started to show, the entire thing came crashing down. Fast, violent, and very, very quiet. In the final days before the Jonestown Massacre, something changed. Survivors later said that unfamiliar men began appearing at the camp. Men who didn't belong. They wore clean clothes, stood apart from the group, and rarely spoke. They didn't help with work, they didn't join in prayer. They only watched. And then just as quietly as they appeared, they disappeared. After these visits, things got worse. The punishments grew harsher. The drills happened more often. Jim Jones became more paranoid, more unstable. Some say these strangers weren't visitors at all. They were watchers, sent to monitor something that was never supposed to be public. And then, on November 18th, 1978, Congressman Leo Ryan arrived. He had heard the rumors, people being abused, held against their will. He wanted to see Jonestown for himself. At first, things seemed normal, but within hours, some followers were slipping him secret notes, begging for help. They said they wanted out, but were too scared to run. The next day, as Ryan prepared to leave with a few defectors, gunmen opened fire at the airstrip. The congressman and 4 others were killed. Hours later, over 900 people lay dead in the jungle. But not all of them drank poison. Some had gunshot wounds, others had been injected with cyanide. Many were found lying in unnatural positions, as if they'd been placed there. This wasn't just a suicide, it looked more like a cleanup, a silencing, and the speed of the US response was strange. Within hours, military teams were on the ground. They blocked access, secured files, and took over the scene. Reporters were pushed back, photographs were restricted, and just like that, the story was over. But the questions weren't. Who were those strange men seen before the deaths? Why were some people executed, not poisoned? And why did the government move so quickly, only after it was too late? Some believe Jonestown wasn't just shut down, it was erased. After the massacre, Jonestown was quiet, too quiet. The jungle swallowed the noise, the chaos, and the truth. The official story wrapped up quickly. Mass suicide, led by a crazed cult leader. But behind the scenes, something far stranger was happening. When the US military arrived, they didn't just collect bodies. They collected documents, tapes, medical logs, personal files. Some of those files were never seen again. Others were marked classified. What kind of religious commune has information the government doesn't want anyone to read? Survivors who tried to talk were ignored or silenced. One woman claimed she heard Jones speaking to someone over a secret radio just days before the massacre. She said he sounded nervous, like he was following orders. She disappeared 6 months later. No trace, no explanation. Another survivor said boxes were delivered to Jonestown shortly before the deaths. He claimed they were full of strange equipment, electronic devices, not food or medicine. He died in a hotel room not long after. The cause of death? Overdose, but those who knew him swore he didn't use drugs. Then there was the list. Buried deep in the recovered files was a list of names not connected to the temple. They included scientists, foreign diplomats, and known intelligence agents. What were those names doing in a jungle cult's records? Some researchers believe Jonestown wasn't an accident. It was a controlled experiment. One that got out of hand, and when things started to fall apart, the people behind it made sure it ended fast and left no loose ends. Jim Jones was found with a bullet in his head. They said he shot himself, but no one saw it happen, and his body was burned so badly it could barely be identified. So maybe the truth was never meant to survive. Maybe Jonestown was more than just a tragedy. Maybe it was a message, a warning, or worse, just one piece of a much bigger plan. Jonestown was supposed to be the end of the story, a tragic headline, a closed case. But the deeper you look, the more it feels like something was left behind, something we were never meant to notice. After the bodies were counted and the headlines faded, a few journalists kept digging. What they found didn't match the official story. Military teams had sealed off the site almost immediately. Reporters were blocked from entering. Photos were taken, then disappeared. Audio recordings were recovered.
He said, I really want to get away from here, and by Christmas I will be gone.
By Christmas you want to be gone? By Christmas do you want to be gone? By Christmas do you want to be gone?
I would ask you, could I go home to make a trip to see my people?
I have the power to send you home by Christmas, but it's not on Trans World Airlines. It's blasphemy. It's blasphemy to talk about going back when you have not been given any approval.
But many were edited, chopped up, missing key minutes. Why would a mass suicide scene need to be hidden? Some say it wasn't about protecting the public. It was about protecting secrets. There were rumors that Jones had worked with intelligence agencies years before Jonestown. He traveled to Cuba. He met with people tied to covert operations. His church moved large amounts of money overseas. These weren't the actions of a simple preacher. These were the moves of someone being watched or used. And then there's the fear. Survivors who tried to speak out were discredited. Some were followed. Others just vanished. One investigator even said, every time I got close to something important, the trail went cold, like someone erased it. But erased by who? A list found in the compound included strange names, people with no ties to the church. Some were military, some were scientists. One was even linked to MK Ultra. It was never explained. To this day, there are files related to Jonestown that remain sealed. The reason? National security. But how could a cult in the jungle threaten national security unless it was part of something much bigger? Maybe Jonestown wasn't a failure. Maybe it was a test, a project that ran too long, got too messy, and had to be shut down. Quickly, quietly, completely. And if that's true, what else have we not been told?